Yo, yo, yo! What is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic manner. Today, we have some new fasting research on the docket, specifically around a topic that is near and dear to one of my very own health regimens. Definitely not you, production team. Early eating, or the time-restricted feeding technique that structures all of your meals earlier in the day rather than the standard later in the day or really all day societal norm. And before you ask, let me just get it out in the open. I have nothing against the societal crowned biggest and most social meal of the modern person's day: dinner. However, if you're interested, like me, in optimizing your pretty cool meat suit, not only for here and now, but for
infinity and beyond.
Yeah, there's a few common details worth knowing. Faux show.
I'm getting that for show.
Okay, moving on. So in the next 12 minutes and 77 seconds, we'll talk about them, along with what early time restricted feeding is, the data to date, this new research to date that explains how meal timing and fasting duration affect cardiometabolic biomarkers, a few being glucose, insulin, cholesterol, and C-reactive protein, an assay for inflammation, and as always, the most important part, what it all means. We also have a guest appearance from some of my own blood work to compare an early OMAD strategy to the large data set in the study that we'll be looking at. Now that I think of it, hopefully production team wasn't getting under my skin that day, or data could be messy. Oh, would you look at the time? Time to eat. Early eating. The research to date has pegged a meal timing protocol, otherwise known as intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding, as one of the most potent health span and longevity boosters that we have at our disposal, improving our biological function from the inside out, upregulating several longevity pathways while improving cellular and metabolic health. At a high level, this is the practice of not limiting the what and how much you eat, although those things are important, but instead structuring all of your energy consumption into strategic feeding windows each and every day. And if you are new here, we talk a lot about all of the different things that happen when we fast. I actually have a Fasting 101 playlist with 40 plus videos and counting that you can find up here and in the show notes below. Now, early time-restricted feeding adds an interesting twist to this concept. This is the practice of positioning your feeding windows earlier in the day rather than later in the evening. And the data to date, which we review in a few other videos which I will all link below, although preliminary, has been super interesting, highlighting noticeable improvements in 24-hour glucose, serum insulin, insulin sensitivity, markers for oxidative stress, and circadian clock gene expression. Hinting, just like I've been hinting to production team that we're gonna take a field trip to Disney, we're not. No, we're not. That we humans and our pretty cool meat suits may be more optimized when we consume our large meals earlier in the day, rather than the societal status quo of big dinners and the consolation prize of food comas. So this new study, recently published in the journal Nutrients, took a unique, large-scale retrospective look at data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey to tease out if there are any associations between meal timing, fasting duration, and cardiometabolic health, or the biomarkers that are responsible for heart health. So let's talk about what they found, didn't find, and, in my opinion, forgot to look for. The study. The cool thing about this one was the fact that it was a large data set, which is really kind of non-existent in fasting studies. It had a sample size of around 16,000 participants, most middle-aged adults with pretty equal gender representation. The not so cool part about this study was the fact that it was a retrospective, observational, epidemiological review of existing data, meaning it was not randomized, tightly controlled, with the main objectives not being focused around meal timing, fasting duration, and cardiometabolic markers. It was probably more like, oh, we got this big data set, bro, and this early fasting thing is starting to get a lot of hype. What if, just hear me out, what if we go back and we see if there's any sort of association or correlation between meal timing and cardiometabolic biomarkers. That'd be pretty cool. And then we could publish it in some journal, get all this press. Some crazy dudes on YouTube would review it in an odd, weird, interesting, highly sarcastic manner with his imaginary production team, and the world will be a better place. That's kind of how I imagined it going down. Which is fine. You just need to understand what you're looking at and the limitations that it has. Speaking of limitations, it also included self-reporting, specifically around dietary and lifestyle habits, which people tend to lie about. And many times they don't even know they're lying about it. So, for this data set, participants completed questionnaires with information regarding demographics, medical histories, socioeconomic status, and behavioral and lifestyle habits. Then offered up, ever so kindly, some blood samples. C-reactive protein, a measurement for inflammation, hemoglobin A1C, an assay for diabetes, glucose, insulin, LDL, HDL, and total cholesterol, all being key markers in gauging cardiometabolic health. With all that, researchers correlated the data to see if there was an association between these cardiometabolic biomarkers and nighttime fasting duration, first meal time, and last meal time. So, did they find anything interesting? Well, first, they saw that longer fasting durations were actually associated with higher C-reactive protein and insulin levels and lower good HDL cholesterol, which to be honest had me like, what? Because ideally, we want all of those to go in the opposite direction that they went. And if we look at previous fasting research, in more cases than not, a fasting protocol improves the aforementioned biomarkers. Right off the bat, these results had me asking why. So I did a little digging, and what I found was the longer fasting group seemed to have the worst eating habits by far as it pertains to inflammation, measured by the Dietary Inflammation Index. And 22% of them smoked. That can't help, but it makes a little more sense now. And it brings up an important point which I will talk about more later. When it comes to health, there is no silver bullet. You just simply can't expect an intervention like fasting to wash out all your other poor lifestyle habits, like eating unhealthy, drinking alcohol and sugary beverages, smoking, having a toxic indoor environment, and not getting nearly enough movement. So after that wacky first finding, what other observations were made? Well, in terms of meal timing, many of the best cardiometabolic markers were found in the early first meal of the day and last meal of the day groups. And for reference, the early breakfast group ate before 7:30 a.m. and the early dinner group ate before 7:15 p.m. These groups showed lower hemoglobin A1C, insulin, and glucose levels, while lipid profiles including HDL, LDL, and total cholesterol were inconclusive and varied across the board, probably because of those, lifestyle habit things. Researchers then looked into how timing compares to fasting duration, and they decided to specifically dive into the interaction between first meal time and fasting duration. So, what'd they find? They found that the early eating plus long fasting duration, which also implies an earlier dinner, showed the best hemoglobin A1C, insulin, and glucose levels. While lipid levels, again, varied. Now, what I wish they added to this, and I really don't know why, was a correlation between fasting duration and last meal time, which I personally think would be a lot more interesting than knowing if someone started eating before 7:30 in the morning. And like I said, we can loosely assume that a earlier breakfast along with longer fasting windows indicates a earlier dinner. That is, if my 7th grade math skills aren't deceiving me. Speaking of 7th grade, now that I'm kind of feeling left out, like a kid getting picked last for kickball at recess, let's whip out some of my data and see how it shapes up when compared to this large cohort. This was a full panel drawn after about 6 months of my early 1 meal a day protocol, where I ate between the hours of 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. each and every day. And for reference, at the time of this draw, I was about 20 hours into my daily fast. So here's what it looks like. Fasting glucose, 80. Hemoglobin A1C, 4.7. Insulin. I do not have direct levels, but insulin resistance was low. LDL 75, HDL 66, total calculated cholesterol 147, and C-reactive protein under 0.1. Overall, these compare up pretty well to that cohort and showed, at least for me, that longer fasting windows did not move C-reactive protein, insulin, and cholesterol in less than optimal directions. Now, it's important to know that these numbers not only reflect my fasting practice, but plenty of sleep, a real whole food diet, daily exercise, and good environmental conditions. All of which I've been building, tracking, documenting, and talking about here on the Tube of You for the last couple of years. And now the question of the day. What does this all mean?
What does it all mean, Basil?
All in all, for the average person walking around this beautiful floating rock in the middle of nowhere, eating earlier, accompanied by strategic fasting windows, will probably yield health benefits. But each individual and their current lifestyle factors will always be the ultimate decider on how effective an intervention is. And we know from all the other fasting talks that the best fasting protocol is the one that you can continuously sustain. Fasting and early fasting have shown to be potentially powerful interventions, but they're no silver bullet. And quite frankly, there's no one intervention that beats out good, solid lifestyle habits. This game of optimizing your pretty cool meat suit needs to be played with a holistic strategy, which is slowly and continuously formulated and deployed as routines that can be continuously executed against each and every day. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes an openness for the short-term uncomfort that accompanies change. But there's no more rewarding mission than one that entails taking back ownership of your most valuable asset, your health. So gather as much objective and subjective data as you can. Build routines, track them, keep learning, and keep optimizing. And shock the shit out of your doctor when they see your next test results after you've started owning your health. Kind of like if I shocked the shit out of production team and told them that we were going to Disney for next week's show. No, put your suitcases in. It was purely a hypothetical. It was a hypothetical. It was a closing line. Why do you even have your suitcases here? Cut.